Welcome back to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World, our 2022 conference. We are joined today by Eric Klein. He's the co-founder and COO of Cloudonix. Eric, welcome, joining us today from Tel Aviv. And his topic today is design thinking. So Eric, let me hand it off to you. Welcome again. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to your presentation, and I will join you on the back end.
Thank you. Talk to you at the back end then, Glenn. So again, the hardest thing that entrepreneurs and most businesses have is understanding who is your customer and how do you reach them. Then how do you tell them the story? And then I'm going to do a little bit, if we have time, about ways that I've come with experience of exercises or things to do about it. Real quick, I'm a serial entrepreneur, husband, father, grandfather. Since we're not live in person, I'm not going to offer you guys to see photos. I've been involved with preventing telecom fraud for the last 12 years. I advise various startups. I write technology and science fiction books. So these are places where I've been. I wrote the chapter on telecom fraud for the cybersecurity book, a disaster recovery story for the International Electronics Consortium, and a novel about exploring the solar system. Okay, where I come from, I've been involved with co-founding 3 startups and have been part of 2 additional ones. So prior to Cloudonix, we did a little bit with Phone B&B. You'll hear me talk a lot about Humbug later, so I won't tell you much about it. But going through this, I've learned quite a lot, mostly by failure. So we've gone through 3 accelerators, the Entrepreneur Roundtable out of New York City, 365X, the Israel branch, and Mass Challenge Israel. I lecture and am part of the advisory board of the computer science program at Steinberg at Pace University and on design thinking in the Lubin School at Pace. And like I said, I do startups in many different verticals. Last, I'm going to talk about us directly. Cloudonix is looking to become the world leader in omniverse communications. We see the fact that all of this omni-channel, omni-communication is a closed platform where you can't communicate from one to the other. So if somebody talks to you in Twitter and they need to call and speak to you by voice, the communications are broken. Now that we're moving out to metaverses and omniverses in various ways, we're taking it to the next step. Okay, what is design thinking? Very quickly, and I'm not going to read it, design thinking is the process of thinking about who your customer is, what they want, challenging the assumptions, and going through this process in an iterative, not necessarily sequential manner. So very quickly, this is the design. You listen to your customer or your partner and you go, what is the problem? What do I need? You empathize with them about what they need, where they're feeling pain. Then you do a first design. Where do you go to make it better? You iterate, you go back and forth with them. Do I understand it? Is it correct? After that, you build a prototype, you test it. And at all the different phases, you can loop back to a prior phase because there is no version, it's finished. We no longer live in a day of software in particular where somebody sends out a compact disc and that's the only last version. Hasn't been that way in 30 plus years. There's always a .1, a new release. If you use a cell phone, you're probably getting weekly updates to your apps. This process is very iterative and repetitive. So never think that you're completely done. You always learn and go, oh, I did it for them. I can bring that back to the main branch and fix it. But the obvious question that people start with as an entrepreneur is, why do you want to innovate? What motivates you to go and take it to the next step? Okay, innovation can rise for many ways, but mostly it's looking at your customer pain point. Otherwise, cities like this would still be thriving 2,000 years later rather than lying in ruins. Nothing lasts forever. With the possible exception of a couple of roads in Crete that the Minoans made 5,000 years ago that are still better than the roads that I've seen in New York and New Jersey lately. Okay? But to innovate is to make changes. Take something that exists and enhance it. You don't necessarily need to start from scratch brand new. Taking an existing problem, an existing solution, and making it better is how you innovate a new solution from an existing one. If you can come up with something unique and first time, that's awesome. okay? But even the iPhone wasn't the first smartphone that was out there. Prior to that, there was a Timex St. Clair that had a smartwatch. You had various smartphones on Nokia. You had all sorts of things with the BlackBerry. So each time it was an iterative and better until finally it hit the point where, holy shit, that is a great product. Everybody needs one. And this is where Steve Jobs made a fortune for Apple. Okay, but the reality is you can only railroad when it's time to railroad. The steam engine was invented more than 5,000 years ago. It was a toy for Egyptians and Greek children that they would use as kind of a party favor. You'd heat up a thing of water, it would spin around, and you get this lovely little spinning top, but nobody could do anything with it. They had no idea what it was useful for. It wasn't until much later that we developed trains using that same principle to actually make progress. So you can't go until you have the tracks, the engines, the controls, all of the various pieces have to have the underlying technology exist. So as Google used to joke, built on the shoulders of giants, this is the real thing. Okay, now I can't hear all of you, so I'm going to ask you to put this in chat. When was the fax machine invented? Okay, Glenn, I'll ask you. Any idea?
I'm thinking B.
Actually, it's D.
D. Wow.
It was created 33 years before the telephone. It was invented while we still had Wild West in the 1843. And the problem with this was nobody had a need to send messages other than telegraph. You didn't need to send a whole picture of something further than you could walk in a day. So it never went anywhere until there was a need in the mid 50s and 60s where they started trying to send cables. So the idea of when the tech exists and when the tech finally becomes useful is a really complicated thing. So again, great book came out a little bit over a decade ago, Smarter Lucky. Judith Hurwitz did an absolutely great job of explaining how some of the biggest companies today like Google or Facebook did not invent an area. Google is built on top of the back of Lycos. Lycos is built on the back of the Web3 catalog project. All of these are built on top of the ARPANET. The technology grew, and as people learned to add new features, new capabilities, then they were able to bring it into new uses that suddenly became incredibly important. If you're looking for inspiration on how to take something that exists and not be the first to category, this is the book to read. Okay, now I mentioned Humbug before. The problem that we found when I was working at Humbug is that there's a legitimate problem. We found that businesses were getting hit in 24 to 48 hour increments for about 25 to 50,000 US dollars in telecom fraud. Somebody would hack into their system, make a premium number call, do other things, and what would end up happening is while they were closed for the weekend, all of these calls would happen, but nobody knew about it. Criminals were sharing the information on how to hack systems, and you could have 3 companies on the same floor in an office building, all get hit one right after the other, and they would not know about it. Either the police would eventually figure it out, or they wouldn't even report it. Okay, so what you need to do is, if you are going to put out a product that people don't realize is a need, 3 to 6 months before you launch, put out blog posts. Go out there and spend all of the time you can to get as much information and SEO available on the topic up front so people are aware of it. And once it starts going, post news articles. Okay, if you're in security, hacking this, password stolen, put out as many articles on LinkedIn, on your company blog, as much as you can, so people will find them and the terms will come back to you. But if you're going to spend all of your time educating once you launch, you're going to educate, not sell. And that's a very frustrating place to be. Okay, now there's 2 different ways of thinking. We used to be worrying about solution. Okay, and when I first started working with Israelis, we had a problem where somebody would go and come up with this really great solution and then go looking for a problem to fix. We've kind of over the last 15 years turned this on the head, which is where design thinking comes in, where you actually start with a pain point, a problem. Okay, you will frequently hear people ask the question, are you a vitamin or a Band-Aid? Are you a nice to have feature, or are you something that's going to save the company from bleeding customers and money? Must have. So the difference is significant. So when you're looking at thinking about problem, you're going, why is there a problem? What is the problem? And you tend to get overly enamored with the technology. But when you're doing the design thinking, you're going, hey, what is the problem and how can I fix it? You've turned the question upside down. Not I've invented this really great algorithm or this wonderful device. It's I've heard people have this problem. How can we solve it? And then you take the next step forward. You think about what you can do with it. Can you creatively find a solution? What are they using today? How can that be improved? And it makes for a much more involved solution. And if you can find at least one company that has it, that's willing to give you detailed feedback in exchange of kind of being your alpha customer, that is worth $1 million investment right there. Because then you've got real world example. But there is an exception to that. We had one company I worked at that was doing software for telecom, and they decided they were going to do it out of the box, just like Cisco. So they went and they found one customer to do it and designed exactly to that customer's spec, and they sold exactly one copy to that customer. So you need to kind of get out of the echo chamber. You need to listen to what's possible, what people need, and get as much feedback early on as you can. Okay, so going through the 4 basic concepts here of design thinking. Every person that you're dealing with, no matter what the customer is, who the company is, you're always dealing with a person. Okay, so you have to think of this in terms of human beings. Wonderful, you've built a rocket ship. It's the best thing since SpaceX. But the person you're talking to is still a human being who's going to buy it from you. Why do they want it? What is it good for them? What do they need it for? Okay, so to do this, and I hinted before, as part of your go-to-market and part of your design is knowing who you're selling to and why. So some of the biggest questions, and HubSpot has a really great free tool on identifying your cohorts. I highly recommend it. Just do a search for cohort analysis HubSpot. I have the link at the end, but it's a great tool. Okay. But okay, Glenn, I'm sorry, you're the only person who can actually respond to me, so I'm going to ask you this. They put garlic into canned dog food. Why?
Wow, I guess not to have the meat as much and save it.
No, the dogs will eat things literally out of the trash, things that are rotten. The idea is the cohort of people who buy canned dog food are women 15 to 35 years old. And they open the can and they go, ooh, that almost smells like table scraps. I feel good about giving it to my dog. It's like people food.
Makes sense. Makes
okay,
sense.
So they're going to buy it again. In technology companies, 9 times out of 10, you're designing a solution at the developer, at the salesperson, the person who has no say or no budget. So you have to make sure you're selling to the right person. You're not selling to the dog, you're selling to the dog owner. Okay, and this was a really great story we got out of ERA. Phil Nietzsche's was one of our mentors. He asked this question to us, and we literally sat there coming through, it's antibiotic, it preserves, went through all the possible answers, and it came down to, no, the person who's who's buying it has to understand that it's a good product and want to buy it again. If it really smelled like dog food, nobody would buy it again.
You know, when my dog was, when I was growing up, and my dog Jamie, I used to make sauce and then pour it on top of the dry food for the same reason.
Exactly. It's to make you feel better about giving it to them and feel like you're giving them a treat. This is where the can comes in. Now, we're walking through January 2019, walking through Times Square, going back to our hotel from ERA, and I turned to my co-founder, I go, Nir, we're not selling dog food. It's like, what do you mean? Like, we're not selling business to consumer. We're doing B2B. Okay, there's multiple levels here. And it's like, he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, we're not selling dog food, we're selling breakfast cereal. Okay, so anybody who's ever dealt with a small child who watches television, they see an advertisement for breakfast cereal, and what is the first thing they're going to do when they see it? Mommy, 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 I want it. 1,000 times a day, mommy, I want it. I have to have it. I'm going to die if I don't get it. And eventually mommy's going to go to the supermarket, read the ingredients and go, well, it's no worse than what I'm feeding you now. Sure, we can try a box. Okay. At which point we've realized that I have a developer who is in a position to ask for, or at least not refuse to use the product, and some sort of a VP, technology, sales, whoever you're talking to, who has a different set of goals, who actually has the budget to approve the purchase. So you have to make sure that your story works for both. I do some mentoring for a aviation-oriented accelerator. And one of the things I point out to them, it's even more complicated in their case, because you need something that the pilot will use, that the supply sergeant will buy, that the congressman will actually request, and that Congress will then actually approve in the budget. It's a much more complicated process. But you have to understand who's involved and what the process is. And you can't just keep aiming at the one who's going to use it if they're not the ones who are actually going to be paying for it. Okay, the ambiguity rule. Everything is going to be ambiguous. The amount of information you have today when you are studying, working, or building is as much information as you have. Tomorrow, you may know 1,000 things that will make what you decide today wrong. But you can't wait for tomorrow's information. You have to work with what you've got and iterate back as you learn more. So the idea of you experiment, you learn, you test, you study. But at some point, you actually have to do something, or you're just going to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs forever and never get off the pot. As a startup, you have to understand and take it forward. So again, while we were at the accelerator, one of the previous companies, Felix Gray, who does sunglasses over the internet, or they did at that time. At this point, I understand they've expanded to prescription glasses too, had a great chat with their CTO and explained what we do about making voice communications possible. And he listened and he's like, holy shit, that's absolutely awesome. People have been promising that for a decade. You're the first ones who actually are delivering it. We're like, right. He's like, but I'm not your target customer. Okay, why? It's like, my audience is 15 to 25-year-olds who are paying $100 for a pair of glasses, and they want to do everything as a text message or a chat. They don't want to talk on the phone. We're like, interesting. So we started brainstorming with him and realized that depending on the product, the age of your target audience or your customer's target audience, if you're doing B2B2C, makes a difference. How much is the cost? And what we found for us is, like, if people are spending more than $500 on the product and are over 30 years old, they're more likely to want to talk to an agent on the phone than if they're spending less than that or younger. And the higher the dollar value, the younger the age went. Nobody at 20 or 25 is going to buy a car or a house using a text message. Understand your customer and their customers to understand where that balance point is between the willingness to buy or to use your service to enhance theirs. So it's a very important thing to understand and discuss with the customer. Who are they selling to and why? Especially when you're doing B2B2C. Okay? But this then leads to, who are your customer cohorts? And as I mentioned, HubSpot has a great tool for this, but no purchase of any real value is done by a single person. You have to remember that these people are being part of a team. So understand who is your initial contact, find out from them who is part of the process. Do they have a decision maker, an analyst, a technical, legal, final? Every company has their own process. Okay. Then for each of those people, know approximately how old they are, what kind of education, what social networks do they use, how do they get their communications or learn about new products and services? What tools do they use? What are the responsibilities? What is going to get them the promotion because you can tell them the story? Use this, you're going to make 25% more sales. You're going to get that raise at the end of the year. What are their goals? What are their objectives? Know a bit about their industry. Because if you don't know who they're selling against or who they're selling to, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, especially in terminology. Okay, who do they go to find out about new products? Do they go to trade shows like this, in person, on web? Do they read trade journals? Do they go through review sites like G2? Okay, do they want webinars? What method are you going to use to educate them that you even exist? What is their process? Do they an RFI, an RFP? Do you need to do a proof of concept? And then again, who's part of the process and how do they rate proposals? So you need to understand who they are and let them do most of the talking. You do open-ended questions, get them to tell you as much as you can, and try to empathize with them about their problems and what they need so you can better put together a solution. Okay? Then again, redesign. Everything you're going to do is going to be iterative. You put out a minimum viable product that has 3 features. Then you're going to add new features. You're going to add new insights, new screens, new tools. You have to understand that. Okay? And this is where some of the things related to customer-centered versus human-centered came in with some of the devices. Many of you have probably seen the CT or the MRI device. It's a big white box, kind of scary for little kids. It's not exactly designed to look pretty. Very functional. So what do? Various hospitals and companies have turned around and tried to make it more accessible and more comfortable for the kids. So they've turned them into spaceships, they've turned them into pirate ships, into submarines, different ways to make it fun for the kid, less scary. It's a difference between it's a purely functional solution or it's a solution designed towards making it comfortable and usable for the people who need it. Okay, tangibility. I've worked with companies where we've gone out and said, we need a project, and come to the conclusion that you've got the companies that have, I can show you working at a customer site, I can do a proof of concept, I can show you a PowerPoint, or tell me what you need and it's a blank piece of paper. That last one, although it will probably get you the best solution, is the one that nobody wants. Show it to me working, show me a prototype, show me something real and tangible, not just a blank piece of paper where you're going to design it with me. Okay, if you're designing a brand new system and software for something, maybe you need to go that route. But 9 times out of 10, your customers don't want a blank piece of paper. Okay, and this is where you go into telling them the stories versus the features. Okay, in your first discussion and in your marketing material, yes, you need to have a short list of features and some of the high points that people are going to be looking at to tick a box to say, do I go to the next session? Do I have another meeting? But they're not looking to find out that you're ISO certified, that you can do 128 versus 256 encryption. You need to understand a little bit more. So this is where you get the ever popular sell me this pen kind of story. Okay. Now, the Wolf of Wall Street did an absolutely horrible thing to marketing because everybody now uses that as a how do I hire salespeople, and everybody knows the story. How do I sell this screwdriver? How do I sell this? Tell me why this is important. Okay, this is what your customer wants to know. Why is this important to them? Okay, what is this going to do for them personally and for the company that they're going to get judged on? Features come into secondary when you get into the tech talk, but that's not the first call. Okay, and I should be pretty close to time if I got it, so we should be now at questions.
Yeah, we've got, Eric, if you can see the Q&A, we've got a question from Alicia in there if you want to take a look.
Stop sharing. Wait, Q&A.
Yeah, down the Q&A side, you see it from Alicia?
1 second, bigger screen. I'll do that with the first network dedicated to hologram.
The Q&A, not the chat, although the Q&A has it more framed as a question. It's more like Jeopardy.
Fashion media company that started the first network dedicated to digital holography. That's a challenge, yes. Okay. I wonder how many holograms impact education and healthcare. Okay. One of the companies that I was mentoring about 1.5 years ago was actually using virtual reality headsets for hospital training, because what they were finding is every new employee had to be trained on the proper way to scrub your hands as if you were going into surgery, because you need to do that on every floor. So every month you're training 100 people on 2 minutes of scrubbing hands, on how to do various procedures. So that what they had done is they had done 3D virtual reality headsets that would take you through and do the training, so you didn't have to wait till you had a whole class, but you could do it quickly and more easily. This kind of training will go much further the better the headsets get and the more options we have. So holographic, once we get decent projectors, we'll move from the headsets to decent holograms. In my sci-fi book, I assume that university posters will be replaced by holograms. So I'm very enthusiastic about the concept. We just don't really have the good tech yet for projecting it. The closest thing I've seen so far is little devices where you it sprays up a mist and they project onto that. We're not quite to the point of save me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope kind of holograms. We're getting there. I'm hoping in the next 3 to 5 years it'll get better, but until then it's going to be the headsets.
Now, that Obi-Wan holographic was from 1977, so we've come a long way. Hey, listen, Eric, we're running tight on time. Great talk, outstanding points. I've never seen an MRI decorated as the Yellow Submarine. The Beatles will be quite proud of that. That's come back. So thank you.
Very quickly,
go ahead.
One last screen. People can take a screenshot of it if they want.
Sure.
These are the links to the various resources I used. And the last one, if you want to get in touch with me, Eric at Cloudonix.io. Happy to chat with anybody who wants to chat, mentor, or anything else.
All right, fantastic. Eric Klein, co-founder, COO, Cloudonix. Thank you for your talk on design thinking. Tremendous job. Great. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Stellos, for having me.
Take good care. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.